We have reached the end of the year, the end of 2016 to be precise. And so what I decided to do as something a little bit more special is that we are going to be looking back throughout the entire year. Now, I do understand that technically with 2016, it's not necessarily the year that people really want to remember the most. I mean, there have been a lot of tragedies that do occur, a lot of celebrities and well-known figures that unfortunately passed away. I mean, like, they've been dropping like flies. And also, call me crazy, but I think I'm starting to actually understand Zuko from the last Airbender movie when he said, "We must wait until everyone is fighting against everyone." Because basically, that's what people have been doing on the internet. I mean, like, it's just an all-out war zone right now. Rather it be for something like small, like the Ghostbusters reboot, or it could be a massively big deal like the US elections, in which somehow the one that's supposed to die this year ended up becoming president. And it's only going to be until a little bit later until America is going to really regret that decision. Trust me on that. But in terms of the news with animation, no, it's not necessarily as dramatic. There isn't any massive tragedies that occurred, but there are some events that really did leave a massive impact. And there will be some reasons why people will look back in 2016 in terms of the animation field. Now, of course, there are the animated films itself. Like, of course, people are going to look back and think about movies like Zootopia or Finding Dory or The Secret Life of Pets or Kubo and the Two Strings and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of the news, I decided to go and pick out the 5 biggest news stories that people will take from this year. And so, I decided to go and do all my research, look back at all the previous stories that we have done, and I compiled, probably like I said before, a list of 5 of the most impactful stories that occurred in the animation industry. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I give you the top 5 animation news of 2016, and we shall begin right now with number 5. And I'm just gonna go and start this off right now by saying that, unfortunately, with number 5, we're not starting with a news story that's related to animation. Yeah, I know, it really does contradict with what I'm saying, but you'll see, it actually does have a bit of a connection. Now, this is not about animated features or anything really with animation directly, but it does have a bit of a link. And I am talking, of course, with number 5, it's going to be more announcements of Disney's live-action reboots. Throughout the whole time, we have been getting a giant list of animated films in which Disney has previously done in their classic lineup from Walt Disney Animation Studios, and they decided they want to go and make more reboots out of them, or live-action reboots per se, because so far they have been seeing huge successes with movies such as Alice in Wonderland, Maleficent, Cinderella, and recently, probably the biggest example, or their most successful film so far, in terms of the Disney live-action reboots, The Jungle Book. And now the hype is getting real with the upcoming live-action reboot of Disney's Beauty and the Beast. But now, when we look into the list of the movies that they have announced, now, I'm just going to go and start things off with the ones that Disney themselves have actually confirmed. Now, they did throw in so many of them that, like, oh, maybe they're considering this, they're considering that, but let me just start off with the ones that they have confirmed, and then I'll just list you the few of them that they are considering, but there's no confirmation yet if it's actually going to happen or if it's actually going to be in development at Disney. So first things first, Disney has announced that they are doing a live-action reboot of Mulan, which is going to be scheduled for November 2nd, 2018, and they are currently searching for a Chinese actress to play the main part. And then afterwards, oddly enough, they have announced a live-action reboot of The Lion King. So far, the only thing we know about it is that Disney is putting it as one of their top priorities in order to go make it, and they actually brought in Jon Favreau, fresh off of The Jungle Book, to go and direct the feature. And then right afterwards, they are going to be making one in the similar veins of Maleficent. With this one, they are actually doing Cruella de Vil. And what we know so far with it is that Emma Stone is going to be playing the character, while Alex Timbers will be the director, or he could be, or at least he's in talks about it. And Disney wants to plan out the production to actually begin early on next year. And afterwards, they also confirmed that there will be a Tim Burton Dumbo movie, and also a Tinkerbell feature film starring Reese Witherspoon, and also they wanted to do some sequels, including Maleficent 2 and The Jungle Book 2, which actually would be kind of funny if they would actually go and do a live-action reboot of the direct-to-DVD sequel. No, but anyways, I'm going a little too ahead of myself. Now, there are some other movies as well that it's not announced by Disney, but it is in consideration, like other news websites like Variety, Deadline, The Hollywood Reporter, they have already mentioned stuff like this. So the ones that have been announced this year actually includes Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Peter Pan, but with David Lowery as the director. There is The Little Mermaid, in which the songs will be remixed and like have a brand new version done by Alan Menken and Lin-Manuel Miranda, and also Aladdin. Okay, so coming in at number 4, it's going to be about an animation studio that's really not doing well. I mean, in recent years, it has not gathered a good reputation per se, both inside the film industry and the animation industry. So 2016 was the time that they decided to go and take a little break and try to reform the studio to become something that's more grand, that's something bigger. And so far, what they have done, it's probably one of the biggest risks I have ever seen to reform an entire animation studio. And will it work? Will it fail? Who knows? But we know that in the future, at number 4, we are getting an all-new Sony Pictures animation. Now, like I said before, throughout 2016, we did not get a single feature film from Sony Pictures Animation. We did get animated films released by Sony Pictures, like the Angry Birds movie and also Sausage Party, but they're not under the Sony Pictures Animation label. That is because the president, Christine Belson, decided she wants to go and take a break to try to retweak everything that's going on in Sony Pictures Animation to make it bigger, to make it better. And now she actually revealed that she has a full-on plan on what they want to do with the studio to bring Sony Pictures to not really bring it back. Well, what I mean is like to put Sony Pictures Animation on top, to make it an animation studio that people could actually take seriously, as much as the other ones that are pretty big right now, like Disney, Pixar, Dreamworks, Illumination, and all those people. So her plan, in short, is to pretty much form Sony Pictures Animation as the next DreamWorks Animation. The format that she wants to build is pretty much just like how DreamWorks Animation was back in the 2000s decade, where beforehand with Sony Animation, they used to release about one animated film a year. Sometimes it can be two, or not necessarily two. Sometimes they could just release like once every year or once every 2 years. Like, they don't necessarily release a lot. Like, the library at Sony Pictures Animation is not necessarily big per se. But she wants to change that, and she wants to go and have a Sony Pictures Animation movie be released twice or even 3 times a year. Now, we've already gotten the schedule, and so far, there's like 10 animated films that they want to release between 2017 and 2020, so it's actually pretty crazy. And they have already announced the list that they have gotten. Now, if we do not count the live action, not the live action, I'm sorry, but I mean, if we do not count the direct-to-DVD sequels like Surf's Up 2 Wave Mania, or whatever direct-to-DVD sequel that they want to do of Open Season, they actually do have a pretty big list. Some of them includes some of their older properties, and some of them has some new properties as well. The list includes, in 2017, we are going to have the reboot of Smurfs, which is Smurfs the Lost Village, the Emoji Movie, and also The Star, which is going to be an animated film, which is going to be in the animal's perspective during the nativity scene. And then afterwards, in 2018, we're only going to have 2 of them, which includes Hotel Transylvania 3 and also the animated Spider-Man movie. We don't have any info about it just yet, but so far, it's pretty much the most anticipated film that Sony Animation has in their lineup. So far, 2019 comes in. We don't know what's going to happen, but there are rumors that are spreading that apparently there would be an animated Ghostbusters movie they would like to make with Ivan Reitman in the works on it. Like, he's talking about what's going to happen in there, so who knows what could happen. And then in 2020, there are a few more. But the one that we do know that is going to happen is an original animated feature called Vivo. And we know that Lin-Manuel Miranda actually has some songs written for it back when the project was originally going to be made at Dreamworks Animation. So that's actually another one that I'm actually pretty intrigued to know what it's going to be. But animated films are not going to be the only things that Sony Animation is going to deliver. At the same time, they also want to expand from feature films and also go and do some television work. In the fall of 2017, they have announced that they want to go and release several TV shows that are based on their movies, one of which being Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs for Cartoon Network, and also a Hotel Transylvania series, which is kind of more of a spin-off since it's more about Mavis and her friends, which they never appeared from the movies before, which would come out on the Disney Channel. While at the same time, early in 2018, speaking of Ghostbusters, they actually want to release a TV show of Ghostbusters that would actually connect to the 2016 reboot. So pretty much Sony has this entire plan, which would not only include all of their properties that they had before, but also with some of their new ones. But the one thing that really did make the biggest news, like when it comes to Sony Pictures Animation and animation news that happened throughout 2016, there has been no other project that made such a huge impact that pretty much everybody has been talking about it. Like, it is hands down the Emoji Movie. My God, have people been talking about it. However, not in the way that Sony Animation wants. In fact, it's probably a nightmare for them when it comes to the Emoji Movie. I kid you not. Never have I seen an animated film received so much backlash, not since the trailer would be released or not since the project was announced, but ever since Sony Animation would first grab their hands on it. Ever since then, like, I feel like the more announcement that Sony Animation would make about it, the more that they would reveal about what the emoji is about, the more that it received massive backlash. People have been hating it more and more and more and more. And not too long ago, since I actually recorded this little podcast right here, they did release the teaser trailer to the Emoji Movie. And so far, the reception that it's been getting, like, everybody hates it. My God, it's pretty much preparing itself to become what Norm of the North is in 2016. The Emoji Movie is going to be for 2017. Like, people are pretty much bracing themselves to pretty much hate this movie. There could be a small chance that it actually could be good, but knowing Sony Animation's reputation, yeah, it's gonna suck. And who knows, this might actually turn out to be their worst animated feature. And that really is saying a lot, trust me on that. Alright, so coming in at number 3 on our list, we are going to be jumping from one animation studio to another. But instead of looking into one of the smaller animation studios like Sony Pictures Animation and just looking at their plans, and we're not 100% sure if they really have changed their ways or not, we are going to be looking at a much more prolific animation studio. Someone that actually got a much bigger reputation than most other animation studios in the modern era. And I'm talking, of course, about Dreamworks Animation. And so with our number 3 story, we actually got Comcast buying Dreamworks Animation. Now, as you guys know, DreamWorks Animation really is not doing well. More and more of their feature films are sadly flopping, and it forced them to not only downsize their entire company, like laying off hundreds of employees, cutting off like buildings and divisions and stuff like that, but also they have to cut down the number of animated films that they release. They're no longer releasing 2 to 3 animated films a year. At the most, they can only do 1 or 2 animated films annually. And if they do 2 animated films in 1 year, one of them has to be a sequel. Like, it's just, it has to be, or else like they're just going to release 1 animated film a year, just like what they did in 2015 when they only released Home. Now, with that said, throughout 2015, they were constantly looking for someone to purchase DreamWorks Animation in its entirety. They looked into SoftBank, and they said no. They looked into Hasbro, and they almost said yes, but Disney came in with a gun saying, "Oh, hell no, you don't." So they pretty much got cut off. But then came Comcast. And they decided to say, why not? And they immediately went and purchased DreamWorks Animation for $3.8 billion. That means that now DreamWorks Animation is going to be under the umbrella of NBC Universal, and the future movies that DreamWorks is going to release will be under the Universal banner, just like with the Illumination films. Now, what pretty much happened throughout 2016 is pretty much changing the face of DreamWorks Animation. We don't see it directly with their features, but we are seeing some massive changes, especially with the business. And the biggest thing, like, what they basically have done is that they have taken many of the people at DreamWorks Animation and many of the people that are already at Universal, and they decided to group them together to form this brand new DreamWorks Animation. And on top of that, probably the saddest thing that came with it was the departure of Jeffrey Katzenberg as CEO of DreamWorks Animation. He decided to leave his company off there and to go and become the chairman of DreamWorks New Media, which pretty much looks into the internet stuff, kind of like the YouTube videos and more of that type of media, like with Awesomeness TV and Nova. But with that said, looking into DreamWorks Animation, the big boss so far, we're not 100% sure with it, but it could be possible that Chris Meledandri is going to be looking over DreamWorks Animation, just like what he's doing right now with Illumination. I'm not 100% confirmed on that. If you guys actually have more knowledge than me on this, then feel free to correct me on that situation. So, with that said, thank you very much. With all that said, so of course, there's like a new entire staff that's going on at DreamWorks Animation. But at the same time, what's being affected in terms of the movies themselves, we are actually seeing a lot of changes. Now, the format of 1 to 2 animated films annually is still staying. There's nothing that really changed there, but it's actually more the factor of what movies are going to be made. We do have some bad news as well, like the sequel to The Croods ultimately got canceled, and How to Train Your Dragon 3 would eventually be delayed until 2019. But there are some other movies that have been announced as well, some original ones and some surprising comebacks. Some of these include Everest, which looks into a bunch of kids who found this little baby Yeti, and they got to go and bring them back to Mount Everest. And then there is Shadows, which the one interesting factor about it is that it will be directed by Edgar Wright. And finally, probably the biggest one that caught everybody's attention is that it will be written, there will be a Shrek 5. Yes, after Shrek Forever After, they decided why not, they are going to bring back Shrek. Now, coming in at number 2 on the list, this was meant to be an animated film that was supposed to be celebrated by the animation community. Finally, we now have a mainstream animated feature, something that was released worldwide, having very familiar names like Seth Rogen, Bill Hader, Jonah Hill, Kristen Wiig, and all those people coming together to create an animated film that would literally shove and push into the minds of audiences with their own dicks that an animated film is not just meant for families and just for kids. It can also be enjoyed by adults as well, and it can be super violent and super sexual at the same time, especially with the orgy scene at the end. However, there is one little event that during the opening weekend that really caused it a lot of trouble. And instead of celebrating the movie itself, people were pretty much asking which one had it a lot worse. Is it the food that were pretty much like mutilated, destroyed, killed, eaten, and all that kind of stuff? Or the artist that had to animate that? And that brings me to the number 2 on the list, which is the Sausage Party controversy. Now, this actually all began with a simple little Cartoon Brew article. Now, Amity did not say anything crazy. He did not sound the red alert or anything like that. He just posted an article that is just an interview with the directors of the film, with Conrad Vernon and Greg Tiernan. Now, things were going well, and, they were pretty much, boosting their own egos, telling themselves how much of a great job that they did, that it was really hard work, but they're so glad that they managed to pull it off, especially with a really low budget for this film. I mean, this is less than $20 million, which is practically unheard of for an animated feature of this caliber. However, it is not in the article itself that the controversy began. It is actually, believe it or not, in the comments section. Now, normally, as someone who does work on the internet, specifically on YouTube, the comment section is often regarded as a place that is just filled with scum and stupidity. Like, you wouldn't want to touch the comment section with the 10-foot pole. However, something interesting in the comment section actually did occur. Now, there are some animators who came out anonymously, actually pulled the curtains, and sadly revealed what actually goes behind the scenes in terms of working as an animator. Pretty much the dark side of having a career in animation, per se. Now, apparently it was revealed that when they were working on this movie, it was a total nightmare, to the point that they don't have free time on their own. They always have to work overtime, and it was down to the point that it was mandatory that they have to work after hours and even during the weekends. And it was down to the point they can't really complain about it, because they actually singled out Greg Tiernan as, like, pretty much portraying him as this massive tyrant. Like, if ever they want something, like if they want to improve on the working conditions, like, he's going to rant up a storm and, like, even threaten the people to be blacklisted to never work on the industry again, and all that kind of stuff, pretty much seen as this monster in a way with how these anonymous animators were portraying him. And on top of that, while they were pretty much forced to work overtime, it's not just that. They had to work overtime for free. That is actually one of the strategies of how they managed to keep a low budget, is that when they had to work overtime, it's from their own time. They can, they're not paid extra. Like, they're only paid during the work hours that they have, and only during that time. Any additional work that they've done, it's all done for free. And it's actually pretty bad that, keep in mind, they had to be, they had no choice but to work overtime. They were forced to, and they were not paid during that moment. But to make matters worse, on top of that, it was apparently also revealed that not everybody was actually credited for the work that they've done in Sausage Party. Not everybody's name is in the credits. I actually have my source here on Variety. It stated, still, those commenting online suggested that many who left production early did not receive credit. While IMDb lists 83 people under animation, only 47 of those got screen credit, according to one comment on Cartoon Brew. So, overall, it really did leave this massive controversy. So not only the studio that made the animation of Sausage Party Nitrogen Studios really got in trouble, but it really opened the door to not just the working conditions of what actually went on behind the scenes of Sausage Party, but also just the entire working conditions of working in the animation field in Vancouver. Because it actually, like, this problem actually started out as a seed, and it just grew bigger and bigger and bigger, revealing so much of the dark moments in working on animation. Alright guys, now this is it. The #1 biggest animation news of 2016. And some of you might be wondering, what is it that I picked? Now, this was not an easy decision, and it took me a while to think about it. Now, the reason why, or like, the biggest qualification for me, for what could count as the biggest animation story of the year, has to be something in which animation fans and the animation community can look back at that year, and that will be the biggest thing that they will remember. What is it that this year contributed that made a huge impact in the field of animation? And honestly, I think I got it. There's actually one thing, like, or a series of events that occurred that really made animation big. In fact, it made animation as a film medium bigger than it ever was before. And what I am talking, of course, ladies and gentlemen, the #1 biggest animation news story of 2016 is something I would like to call the box office record extravaganza. Now, what I am talking, of course, is that at the box office, there have been many different records that have been broken, and a lot of historical moments, like first-time evers, that actually did occur. Now, let me start this off with Zootopia. Now, Zootopia actually did start off with a small record, like kind of really specific, nothing too big, but still worth mentioning. When Zootopia began, it actually got the biggest opening ever for an animated feature film released in March, when it actually got $75 million, beating out Illumination's The Lorax from 2012. Okay, so that's nice. That's a good small one. So, okay, you're off to a good start. But the big one, the big life-changing, record-breaking movie in terms of animated films has to hands down be Finding Dory. Oh my god, where do I begin with this? Well, I guess I'll start right at the very beginning, because Finding Dory broke every single record for the biggest opening ever for an animated feature film. All of them. It actually started out on Thursday. It actually got the biggest Thursday preview, where it actually beat Minions by a whole bunch with $9.2 million. I mean, keep in mind, this is just the Thursday preview, where it only gets like a few screenings. So getting almost $10 million on it is actually quite spectacular. And then when Friday came along, like the first initial release day of Finding Dory, it actually got the biggest single day record for an animated feature film, where it actually beat out Shrek the Third by earning a total of $55 million in one day. I mean, there are plenty of animated films that cannot get that during an entire weekend. So that's pretty spectacular. And then suddenly, it actually beat Shrek the Third again in order to get the biggest opening weekend ever for an animated feature film by getting a grand total of $135 million. That is spectacular. And once again, you cannot even find, there really isn't a lot of animated films that actually got, well, actually, no, there actually is a lot of animated films that couldn't even manage to get a total of $135 million at the domestic box office, like in grand total. Yet here is Finding Dory that managed to get that all in one weekend. But then, as it kept on going, it actually earned more and more and more money, down to the point that it even beat Shrek 2 to become the highest grossing animated film at the domestic box office ever, hands down. Nothing else has more. And so far, it has gathered a grand total of $486 million just in North America alone. That is quite phenomenal. But then came the next animated film, and that actually helped out to make more animation records. Not as much as Finding Dory, but it really made a lot. And I'm talking, of course, about The Secret Life of Pets, one of the surprise big hits of the year, and like Finding Dory, one of the most successful animated films of that summer. It started out earning the record for the biggest opening ever, like the biggest opening weekend ever, for an original animated feature film, beating out 2015's Inside Out by getting a grand total of $104 million. For The Secret Life of Pets, that is actually quite fascinating. But then, both Pets and Finding Dory actually collaborated in a brand new record. Now keep in mind, during the summer, it was dead. A lot of reboots and a lot of sequels came out, and a lot of people really were not interested. There were only a handful of movies during the summer that were actually major hits. And luckily, Finding Dory and The Secret Life of Pets were actually, a couple of those movies, believe it or not. Where they actually worked together in order to get the record of the longest consecutive weeks for an animated the longest consecutive weeks that the #1 spot at the domestic box office was dominated by an animated feature film. For a total of 5 weeks, it was an animated film taking over the #1 spot. 3 weeks were covered by Finding Dory, and 2 of them were covered by The Secret Life of Pets until that chain was pretty much broken with Star Trek Beyond. So that was quite phenomenal. They managed to get that record done. And then there is another record. This isn't the best one, but we're going to go in the opposite route. And this is actually a record for performing the least well, the worst. And I'm talking, of course, about The Wildlife. It really isn't much, but it actually did manage to pull off a record for the worst opening weekend ever for, the worst opening weekend for an animated feature film of that decade, opening with only $3.34 million during that weekend. It really is pitiful, and seriously, that movie sucked so bad. And if you guys are curious about, where does it rank in the worst ever? Well, in terms of the worst opening weekends ever for an animated feature film, it's actually at number 4. But then, moving down the line, there is actually one more huge record, and this is possibly the biggest record that 2016 has ever gotten. And this is why, this alone actually does make it #1, the biggest animation news story. It's actually the collaborative work of Finding Dory and Zootopia. Because for the first time ever, we actually have 2 animated features that actually got over $1 billion at the box office in 1 year, with both Finding Dory and Zootopia, which technically, since they're both distributed by Disney, they're both, this also makes it the record that you got 2 animated films in 1 year that they both made $1 billion done from one company alone. And it's phenomenal. And keep in mind, there are still, as I'm recording this, there are still some movies in theaters that are still ranking up some money at the box office. We still have Moana that's performing exceptionally well. And then we also got Sing that is also doing quite well. It is kind of debatable if it's going to do as well as The Secret Life of Pets, but it is still doing well. So who knows? Maybe we'll see down the line that it will probably make Moana could probably rank up a lot of money at the box office, and so could Sing. Hey guys, this is Animat. I just want to remind you guys that this is just a little taste of what you can get with the Animation Podcast. This is not all of it. If you guys want to go and listen to the full episodes of the Animation Podcast, then allow me to show you some of the different ways that you can go. First off, you can actually go on the website that it is hosted on, Filmbook, so you can go directly onto there. You can also go and check out the official Filmbook Podcast YouTube page, so at least you don't have to go away from YouTube and you can listen to the podcast right there. But if you would like to listen on the go, like if you want to listen it to on your phone or on your iPad and all that kind of stuff, then you can listen to it on either iTunes or you can listen to it on Android. So those are all the different options, and if you'd like to have more info, then all you have to do is just check in the description down below. And with all that said, I just want to say thank you guys so much for listening, and until next time, see you later, dudes!